Cool. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I think last week Vamshi did a very good session on integrations, right? So it was very helpful. And on the same lines, I am continuing on integrations. In fact, this is a prequel to what Vamshi did, right? So this comes before we start implementing any integration projects. So the agenda for today is we'll talk about why integration requirements are different, right? Then we will talk about a framework for gathering requirements. I think you must be aware of it, but we'll still cover it from basics. It's called multi-levels requirements framework. Then we'll understand what each level is. Then under each level, what are we going to do and what are the key deliverables in that level, right? Then we'll also understand something called anti-patterns, some things we should not be doing, or we should at least try avoiding those things, right? And then we'll end the session with Q&A. Okay. So some guidelines, this is a request more than a guideline, like let's make it interactive, ask questions and doubts whenever you get it, right? You don't have to worry about I'll ask later, you can ask anytime. And anybody feel free to answer for those, right? So because I know everybody has worked on one project or the other, their integration is there, and you might have learned certain things which I may not be able to answer, you might be able to answer. So share your thoughts and experience, right? Cool. So with that, let's get started. So what is integration? We generally say integration is connecting two or more systems so that we can share data and processes, right? While this definition is technically good, it explains like we are connecting two systems and what it is missing is the business angle, right? It doesn't say what we are solving. It just says we are connecting two systems. Just because we have two systems, connecting those two systems is not helpful. So it has to solve some purpose. A better and simpler definition is an integration is a business process that happens across system, right? So this is, while this is a very simple definition, but it says like we are trying to solve a business problem by connecting two systems or more systems, and the process is happening across multiple systems, right? So integration is not just about data sync. It is data sync, it contains data sync sometime, but it is mostly a business process distributed across systems. So that's what integration is, right? So anybody having any questions, any thoughts so far? So let's understand why integration requirements are a little different from other requirements. Let's say, for example, when we are building on a Salesforce system versus building it across multiple systems, why it is different is basically integration connects autonomous systems which are built on different technologies, built on different business rules, and built by different teams, built and managed by different teams, right? So when you say autonomous system, those systems work independently. They have already have certain business logic built in them, and they can work independently. But for certain business processes, we will have to connect the system so that the process is kind of executed across all the systems, right? Next is timing is uncertain, because just because something happened in one system, it doesn't mean that the data will flow or the process will automatically flow to the other system. Sometimes the flow will happen and sometimes it will not happen, and we cannot guarantee that. When two different systems are talking to each other, we cannot be sure like the data will come when we expect it to be, right? So there can be gaps, there can be delays, and there can be failures also. So that's why we have to consider like failure is the default. It's not an exception. When it comes to integration projects or integration requirements, failure is the default. We should assume that the integration will fail. Now build on top of that. How are we going to mitigate that failure, right? So that's what we have to consider. Then when it comes to integration, when bugs happen, they are not just bugs, right? It kind of becomes a friction between teams, because I think human beings attach to weird kind of things, and they also attach to softwares they build, right? So when you point at a bug, it feels like we are pointing at them. because they're attached to the system, and that can cause frictions between the team. And then rather than considering them as bugs and issues and fix them, people will take it on their ego. And another thing is failures are hard to detect because the things are happening across systems. And even when we detect the failure, people will start pointing fingers like it's not our system, it's your system that is failing, right? So those kind of things will happen. So that becomes hard to debug and fix. Then if we don't identify the issues early and let them appear later on in the stage, it becomes exponentially more expensive and time consuming to debug and fix and make sure everything is working. So that's why the integration requirements are little different from traditional single system projects, right? So so what is the goal of integration requirements? Is basically the goal is not to predict every issue, right? So that's impossible. We cannot predict everything that can go wrong, but at least we can reduce avoidable issues. So what are avoidable issues? We have learned so many things across our projects, right? And we know these things can break, these things can go wrong, and just avoid those things based on our learning. Today we might be able to identify like there are 10 issues we already know which will happen, and we will avoid them, and as we go on we will add it to that list. So that list of avoidable issues will keep on growing, and over time we'll be able to find most of the bugs even before starting the project. We know like we can take certain steps. So we are only focusing on reduce avoidable bugs, and we are not trying to predict every possible issue that can happen, which is impossible to do. And if we do this, it will maximize the clarity upfront, even before writing a single line of code, even before designing the system itself. At the requirements level, we can capture a lot of issues and even communicate it to the customer so that they are aware of it, right? If that needs to be communicated. Yeah, so before we start with the framework, any questions so far? Anybody having any thoughts?
How can we ask the right questions to avoid these issues?
Yes.
What
Yes.
get the frequent issue that appear with,
Correct.
or is it system related? Because
Yeah.
system has their own separate issue.
Yes. Yeah. I think CP made a very good point, and that's what this framework is all about. So basically, there are many frameworks for requirement gathering, understanding requirement clearly, and one of them is called multi-levels requirements framework. This is not necessarily the best framework, but it is simple and it can actually do the job, right? There are many complex frameworks as well. If it works for you, you can continue to use it, or you can use this framework, right? So what this framework has is multiple levels, right? First is the business level, then we go to the process level, then the data and technical level and operational level. So if we can understand the requirements at all of these levels, we'll actually have a lot of clarity upfront. So we don't have to wait till the bugs come after we complete the design or after we implement it and take it to them and then find the issues. We'll be able to find a lot of issues if we follow these steps, right? And what are these steps basically? As you said, it is just a set of questions and deliverables. And if we ask those questions and we create those documents and deliverables, we'll have clarity. So that's what this framework is about. It's a very, very simple framework where we just have to ask right questions in right order to the right people, right? And then create those deliverables. So we'll see what are those questions and what are those deliverables. And you can add on to that. You might be asking a different question as well. So you please add on to that, right? So let's start with business level requirements. So some of the questions we will be asking is what business problem are we trying to solve here, right? That is the most basic question we should ask. Like what problem are we trying to solve? I have given an example like right now, let's say sales team lacks visibility into orders. Sales team is predominantly on CRM and they are using CRM day to day, but they don't have order details because order details are in ERP system, right? So that's why they lack visibility into order details, and because of that, there are delayed responses to customer, and maybe that is causing customer satisfaction issues. So very simple statement, but it captures a lot of things, right? So this is a sample, right? This is not necessarily the only issue that we are solving. I just given an example. So the next question is, who are the primary stakeholders who are for whom we are going to solve this problem? It's the sales team, right? Because they need to have order information in their CRM system so that they can communicate with customers effectively. So by doing this, if we build this, hello, yeah. So if we build this integration, what are we going to eliminate? What manual work that they are doing today that gets eliminated is this. So this integration eliminates manual checking of order details in ERP system. So what is happening today is the sales team is using CRM, but they also have to log into ERP system to get order details, right? So that is what we are going to eliminate. So once we get order details into CRM system, they will be able to, they just have to use one system. They don't have to log in into two different systems and get details. Then how will we measure success of this integration, right? If we build this process, then how are we going to measure the success? 1 second. Yeah. Is basically it should reduce manual effort, right? So these are like KPIs. So it should reduce manual effort, it should improve response time, and it should also improve customer satisfaction. There could be other things, but like just an example, right? Then we should answer this question for sure, like what happens if this integration either gets delayed or if it fails or if it works incorrectly. Like I said, we have to assume like it will fail for sure. If not today, at some point in time it will fail, and we have to make sure that we have covered that, right? And we have answered this question well. So for example, if integration fails or works incorrectly, what it means is it provides incorrect information to the sales team, and that could lead to loss of trust, or sometimes it may lead to financial implications. Say for example, customer is asking about certain order and it has not come into CRM system, and he is giving wrong information to the customer, and customer may get like say like you don't know anything and may cancel the order. Maybe some kind of financial implications will be there, right? So these are some of the questions to answer, and we have to confront the consequences of failure right upright, like upfront, because if we don't say this, like this can happen and customers are not aware of it, they assume like integration will work all the time, right? So we have to tell them what are the consequences of failure, and every time consequences are not that big, right? So every integration is not critical. Sometimes if data is not coming for a week also, we don't care for some of the integrations, but some of the integrations are so critical that they may lead to some financial problems, right? So we have to, if we answer this question, we will know what is the criticality of that integration is, right? And we should not assume like for customer or some for people, everything is a priority, but not necessarily. When we have integration between two systems and there are 10 integration touch points, maybe 2 integrations are critical. Other things, even the data comes after a week, even the integration fails frequently, doesn't matter. But those critical integration touch points we need to identify, and that we can identify by answering these questions, right? So once we answer all of these questions, we have to create something called a business objective statement. Let's say this is a business objective statement. Integrate CRM with ERP to sync order details. How many people think this is a good business objective statement? Anybody thinks this gives enough information, or this is not a good statement? Yeah. So this is yeah. So while it says it will connect CRM and ERP, it is not telling us what business problem it is solving, right? So a better statement would be something like this: enable sales team to view accurate order details directly in CRM so that they can respond to customer queries faster and improve satisfaction, right? So this is how a statement, a business statement should be read, business objective statement. So what it has, the difference between these two is it focuses on business outcome. It doesn't really talk about the technicalities of integration. For business people, it doesn't matter how you are integrating the two systems as long as it serves the business purpose, right? So it should state clearly what the business problem that we are solving, what is the business outcome and who benefits from it, right? So if you look at the statement, it clearly says like the problem it is solving is it will make sure sales team gets accurate order details in the CRM system and the customers will benefit from it, right? So that's what it says. It doesn't talk anything about how we are connecting the two systems. Okay. So those are some of the questions to ask at business level, and the deliverable here is just a statement that we are creating, right? So any questions, any thoughts so far? It's clear. Okay. So let's move on then. So the next level is the process level, right? So under process level, we'll be asking again a few questions. Uh, so first thing we need to understand is how it is happening today, right? Okay, we will solve this problem, but what is the state today? How are we solving this problem today? They may say we are not solving this problem, or they may say we are solving it some way. So they are saying like CRM, sales team gets CRM, so they access CRM to get customer details, but they also search in ERP to get order details. So which means they have access to two systems today. That's the status today. So they want to eliminate that. They don't want people to log into two systems to get the details. So that's where the integration comes into picture. So then when, how and in what sequence this integration should happen in this business scenario, right? Business case scenario. So they will say like whenever the order status is updated in the ERP system, that order detail has to be pushed to CRM, right? When it happens, whenever the order status is updated, it has to flow into CRM. So that's the sequence in which it happens. So what triggers this business process? The integration happens after the order status is updated. So updating the order details triggers this integration, right? Then the next question could be, this is little technical, but I think we should ask this question, right? It will actually tell us exactly when we should call this, right? Is it a event driven thing? When we say event driven, whenever some action happens in the system, some update happened, some record got created. So is that when we want to do it? Or is it scheduled? It happens every 15 minutes, every 2 hours, whatever. Or is it user initiated? User is requesting for some data and that is when we have to give the data, right? So if we answer this question, we will know exactly when we have to or how we have to build this integration. So let's say for example, in this case, they say like, so it's okay, we'll build this scheduled every 15 minutes sync the order details, right? So it's not like we want to do it real time, every 15 minutes we'll sync the details. Some customers may say like, let's do it every time there is a order status update, we have to push it, but it's not so critical. It tells us like it's okay for 15 minutes of delay, right? So those are the kind of questions we should be asking at process level. There are a few more. Okay. We also need to ask like, again, little technical, but we can word it accordingly based on how technical the customer is. So we need to ask, is this a synchronous or asynchronous, or is it one way or bidirectional integration, right? So in this case, as we said, like in the previous slide, we said 15 minutes is fine. So that is not a synchronous one. Synchronous means immediately. It happened in ERP, it should flow into CRM. That is synchronous immediately. But in this case, there is a 15 minutes delay, so obviously it is asynchronous. And the data flow is happening in one direction only. We are not doing two-way sync. We are just pushing data from ERP to CRM. This is just an example, right? So it could be like two directions also. Then what is the happy path? Like if everything goes right and nothing is wrong, so what would happen? Order status, whenever the order status is updated in ERP, that will automatically come into CRM. So that is the happy path. But life is not that simple, right? So everything will not go as per the plan. So we need to know what are the exception paths. So things can go wrong. If things go wrong, what do we do? So in that case, say for example, what is an exception path? Let's say everything is working fine and one fine day a developer created a validation rule in Salesforce and everything stops working, right? So that happens, right? Or maybe not even validation rule, just making a field required and the data is not coming for that particular field, the system will stop working, right? So this is just an example. There can be many such exception paths. So if that happens, if there is an exception and integration stops working, what do? Is there a manual fallback? Is there a way the process can continue, right? Business cannot stop because just because integration failed, business cannot stop. So something has to be done, and that has to be communicated with customer, and it has to be actually captured in our documents that we share with the customer, saying that if that goes wrong, then we have to have a manual fallback, and customer should understand, like, everything will not work. Happy path is just one scenario, right? There are many other exception scenarios. So they should understand, like, if that happens, there has to be probably a manual team, say, let's say sales operation team, which will manually update the orders in CRM. So that's the fallback. So we have to actually communicate all of these things to customers and also to the team, right? Whoever is involved in that project. Any questions? Any doubts?
He asked customer about Vetto, this is Vetto, whether it is seat and ribbon or schedule. The back is still
Yeah, they will say make it real time. Correct. So we'll talk about that also. Yeah. Okay. So what are the deliverables at the process level? So we need to create a process flow diagram, right? So generally it's a swim lane chart, something like this. It's a very simple one. I know it will be much more complex than this, but just for the sake of explaining, I have created this. So basically, generally create it as a swim lane chart, right? I hope everybody has used swim lane charts, right? Like you can see, this look like those Olympic swimming competition, right? There are swim lanes, and each swim lane belongs to one actor. So in this case, ERP is one, CRM is one, sales user is another, right? So whenever order status is updated in ERP, the push that details to CRM, and CRM will validate it, update the order status so that sales user get to see the order details. A very simple flow, but in real projects, it will be a little bit more complex than this. So if we ask all of those questions, and at the end, if we are able to create this flow diagram, I think that will be a good deliverable for process level requirements, right? So far, making sense. Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to the next one. Now comes the data level requirements, right? And each of these levels are requirement, and that goes in that order. First start with business, then process, then data. So at data level, we have to ask, we may not ask this to the business user, whom we will ask is a different team probably, who are little bit technical. So we will ask them what entities are involved. So when we say entities, it could be like we are saying, we need customers details, we need opportunity line item, sales order line items. So these are the entities involved in this specific integration, right? This is not, we are not even talking about all the integration. This is just one touch point for getting order details to Salesforce. These are all the entities involved, right? Because order is created against opportunity and opportunity line items, right? So these are the entities involved. Then very important question to ask is, which is the system of records, right? Why it is important is this. I'll tell why it is important. Before that, CRM is the system of records for customers and opportunity. ERP is the system of records for sales order and related shipment invoices or whatever, right? So why it is important? Anyone wants to say, like, why identifying the system of records is important? Yes, correct. So like we said, we have to assume that integration will fail and there will be discrepancies. Let's say when I log into Salesforce, I'm seeing that this particular customer has 2 orders, but customer is saying he has placed 5 orders, right? There is only 2 orders in Salesforce. Now where do I look for it? So if I identify, like, this is the system of records. So I know that for sales order, ERP is the system of records. I know, okay, Salesforce is reflecting wrong data. So we have to look into ERP for that, right? So identifying that system of records, a single point, a single source of truth is very important. For each entity, we have to do this. For each entity that is involved, we have to identify which is the system of records for that particular entity, right? So then we have to, sometimes it's good to capture some of the mandatory fields, not necessarily like we will capture every field upfront during the requirement itself, but at least some mandatory fields. We will know like customer ID is important because without customer we will not be able to link to the orders. Then probably opportunity ID is important, order number, date, status, product code, quantity. So some of the important fields are mandatory. Without that it doesn't make sense. Suppose there is an order and we don't know what is the quantity of order line items, it doesn't make sense, right? So we need to capture those details upfront, like these minimum fields you have to send. Other details you are not sending, it's okay, right? And we also, if possible, capture at that time itself, ask them like, is transformation needed? For example, order status needs to be transformed to corresponding values in CRM. Say order status in CRM is something else, they may say completed, and in Salesforce they are saying done. So order there says completed and in Salesforce it said done, and when you sync it will not work because Salesforce is expecting value done. So when we push the data into Salesforce, we have to transform it. We have to change it from completed to done, right? So those kind of transformations we need to ask. We may not get those questions answered, but we still have to ask it, right? So few more questions. How is the data entered into the system, right? So who is entering the data and how it is entered into this system is basically probably we are talking about order details. Dispatch team updates the order status manually into ERP system. So we know dispatch team is doing it and they are updating in ERP system and they are doing it manually, right? Or some people may say like the order status is coming from a e-commerce system, Shopify, right? So in that case there is no manual. So automatically the status is coming from Shopify, correct? So we need to know how the data is coming into the system. Either it is coming manually or automatically from another system. Yeah, one of the very important question to ask is there any historical data, right? It's okay, we are building the integration and we are assuming everything will work, but at the end customer will come and say like, yeah, there are so many orders that we have done so far. What are we going to do about them, right? So we need to ask them like, is there any historical data? So do we need to migrate them? What is the volume and where the data is currently? So they might be just using an Excel sheet to maintain order details, right? So we don't know. So if we ask these questions, we will get to know. So probably they will say like, let's migrate 12 months of data and we have around 60,000 records, right? 60,000 orders and currently it resides in some legacy system, right? So it gives us enough details as to, okay, we have to make sure that after we build the integration, we have to also do the data migration and what is the volume and what system it is in, right? Then we also ask, so this is for historical data, but what is the volume day to day, right? We are building the integration, but what is the volume of data that is getting exchanged between the systems? So we might say like, okay, there are like 300 to 3000 to 5000 orders per month, and each order has 3 to 5 line items also. It's not just orders. When we say orders, we might assume like, okay, 3000 records is fine, but we missed the point, right? There are 3 to 5 line items associated with each order. Now, how many records it is? If there are 5000 records and 3 line items, it's like 15,000 records. So we have to ask little bit, like we have to go a little bit deeper also, right? So once we have asked all of these questions at data level, so we have to create some documents. So one is data mapping document. So which is important, and this document itself will tell you a lot of things, right? So if we can capture all of these things, what are the entities, what is the source system and what is the target system, and what is the direction in which the integration is happening, and then what triggers it, right? So this itself gives you so much of details. You can also capture more details. Say for example, I want to capture the format. So ERP is giving me say XML data and I have to convert it to JSON, but it's a little bit more technical. But at this level, at least if we capture this, I think it will make our life easy, right? Basically, we are saying customer data is in CRM, it has to move to ERP, and this is just one way, and we are doing it nightly, right? We don't have to make it real time, right? So we'll see why it should not be real time. Some of the integrations we have to push the customer to do like dashed integration, right? So another thing we have to create is data flow diagram, right? So together these two diagrams will give us lot of things. So again we are saying like the two systems are integrated, Salesforce and SAP. Customer data is flowing from Salesforce to SAP. Opportunity is also flowing from Salesforce to SAP, and order details from SAP to Salesforce. And we have also identified when it happens. This is a nightly batch. This is a whenever opportunity is closed one, that is when the opportunity data is flowing. And whenever, if the order status is updated, every 15 minutes the order status is pushed to Salesforce, right? So creating this document and showing it to them, they will understand. Like if we write it in words, people will not understand. But if we create this document and show it to them, okay, they will identify and say, no, we don't want it 15 minutes, right? Let's make it real time. So then we will be updating this document, right? Okay, any questions, any doubts, or even thoughts? Any thoughts?
Schedule every time. How we can handle the meetings?
Yeah. We'll see. If we are doing real time. So you are saying if we are doing real time, how do we handle the API limits? Yeah.
Identification of the number of API needed.
Yeah.
And all.
Correct. So if we answer all of these questions, right? Previously asked, what is the volume of data? So based on that volume, let's say 3,000 to 5,000 records, probably it's not a bad idea to do it real time, right? But if they say like there are like 1 lakh records, 1 lakh orders per week, then probably we should think twice, right? Should we do it real time or should we ask customer, push the customer not to do it real time? Because there are problems, there is a trade-off. Whenever we do, whenever we choose between two things, there is a trade-off. When we say real time versus scheduled, so real time gives me data immediately, but it consumes more APIs, right? And if we are saying there are lakhs of APIs that are going to get called, so if we hit that limit, then what are we going to do? Because there are other integrations also. This is not the only integration, right? So we are just talking about one touch point here. So if we lay out all of those end touch points and say like this is real time, this is scheduled, because if we do it real time when we are consuming API limits, then probably we'll hit the limit and system will just crash, right? So I think if we have all these data points, we can convince the customer to go one way or the other, right? So now comes technical details. So till now we are just talking about business, and still this is again at the business level. It's not even, we are not even talking about how we are going to implement it, right? So we are just asking a few questions, trying to understand what are some of the requirements. So what we need to understand is what kind of integration is supported, right? So okay, we are going to integrate the two systems. What kind of integration does Salesforce support and what kind of integration does the ERP system support, right? So does it support API integration, event based, or do they use middleware, right? So let's say they will say like, okay, we can support API based also, event based also, and we also have a middleware, right? So and their principle or their way of doing is they want to make sure everything flows through middleware, right? So they already have set up middleware, they already have integrations happening with other system. Now Salesforce is coming into picture, so middleware will be a best approach to do it, right? Then what are authentication and authorization requirements? Little bit technical, but this is asked with other technical teams. Like we will not be asking it to the CEO of the company, right? He will not be able to answer it. So we'll ask them and they will say like, okay, we'll use all industry standard OAuth, all of those things. And we have to make sure that everything is set up using a service account, and we have to also make sure that least privilege access is given. So what is a least privilege access? Anybody wants to answer to that?
Basic artwork, the limiting the people.
Yeah, correct. So basically, whenever we build any system, we have to make sure that people get only access to the amount of data they need to get their job done, nothing more. So we should never expose more data to people. So we should try to eliminate access as much as possible and give them least privilege. If they are getting their job done, that's enough, right? We should not expose more data. So anyways, they already answered like they have a middleware, but we should also ask them as an independent question, like, do you have a middleware? What kind of middleware do you have? So they might say, okay, yes, we have an existing middleware, and our data has to pass through the middleware system, right? Then yeah, so there could be some scenarios where other third-party tools could be used. Say, for example, we need Zapier for something, right? For some integration, we'll use Zapier, they will say, or maybe N8N. So those kind of systems they want to use. So we have to capture that. In this case, we are saying there is a middleware. Okay, there is a middleware, but if we use that middleware, what are the impacts, right? So we will be using middleware for many things. So we'll be passing all data through middleware. It means it has licensing and operational costs. Like middleware is not free, right? So that's why many companies don't have a middleware, because it's very expensive to have a middleware like MuleSoft, right? It's not a economical software, right? So we need to ask these questions and understand any cost implications of those. And another important question which we kind of miss is, we need to ask what other systems are there. Okay, we are talking about only 2 systems so far. What other systems are there? Because that will tell us in future, okay, we maybe have to integrate with other system also. They will say like, we are using Shopify, but we are not talking about that right now. But we will probe them and ask them like, okay, let's what is happening in Shopify, right? Because that may open up another integration touch point. So we may understand like, okay, they have CRM and ERP, but along with that they have financial reporting system, a data warehouse, the customer support system, whatever, right? So, and we have to tell those are not part of this scope. Like we have to call this out. And then they may say like, okay, no, wait, let's include this particular system, customer support system. Let's not keep it outside the scope, right? So calling out what is in scope and what is outside the scope is important. Because those are the things which will make, which will create a lot of headaches later on, right? So once we have understood all those technical questions and got answers, and those are not the only questions, right? There can be many more questions, and these are minimum what we are saying. Like from your experience, you may know like you will be asking 10 other questions as well. So at the end of this technical requirements, we need to create high level integration architecture diagram. So this is the architecture diagram, a simple one, but it even considers all the systems that are not part of the scope, right? And we may highlight here like, this is part of the scope and this is part of the scope, this is part of the scope, these are not part of the scope, right? So when we show this, they will understand, okay, this is what we are doing, and anybody will understand from this. Okay, any questions? Is this making sense to all of you?
In that case, let's try.
Okay. Okay, cool. So once we have this much, I like we can say like, we can confidently say we have got information to start working on the project, right? So if we answer all of those questions and we create all of these documents, the requirements will be very clear. Then there are some operational questions, right? So okay, we are building the system. Once system is built, everything is ready. We have to also make sure that it goes live on some day, right? And when it goes live, then the problems start, right? Until then, everybody is feeling like system is getting built and everything will go smoothly. And the day we go live, that's when everybody starts making noise, right? So we have to basically set up SLAs for each integration touch point. We have to say what is the SLA for that. So if it is a real-time integration, then the SLA, it has to happen immediately. So there is no other go, right? But in this case, we are saying there is 15 minutes delay between 2 systems, and that is good for business. And we have to call this out. We have to say like, this is the SLA. If the order detail is not coming, don't come and talk to me unless it has been 15 minutes, right? So if it is past 15 minutes, then you raise a question. Then we have to also make sure that monitoring and alerts are set. So we have to monitor each integration, because we said like, integrations will fail for sure. No matter how much care you take, the integrations will fail. So only way to like reduce impact is to monitor them, and monitor them centrally somewhere. Like if monitoring is happening across many systems, then that is also not good, because then there is no central ownership. right? Then there is no central one person who is saying that, okay, integration is working or not working. So responsibility should not be with too many teams. It should be centralized, maybe in the middleware or maybe some other system. And then we have to alert people whenever there is a failure. Even if there is a failure and we retry for some time and again it's not going through, there are like 5 times we retried and it didn't go through. There is a SLA breach, like 15 minutes has to come, but it didn't come. And some validation error, anything happens. For any reason the integration didn't go through, then we have to alert the people who are responsible for those. So that's where comes the ownership and escalation part. Who is the owner of this particular integration? So whom do I contact if the order data is not coming through? This is probably the integration support team. So there should be a support team or probably some other team. That is the first level. And if the issue is not resolved, then it has to escalate it to IT integration lead or maybe some other lead, or maybe sometimes we can capture more levels of escalation, right? So this is important, and this has to be, this we are doing at the requirement stage itself. We are not doing after we build the system. So this we are doing at the requirement stage as well. Like this is how we will operate, right? This is operational. So this is, once the system goes live, this is what we will do, right? So if that happened, right? If integration failed and it didn't go through, who will correct the data? Now the data is not correct. The two systems are saying two different things. So who will make sure it is correct? So probably integration support team and sales operations team will sit together and make sure the data is correct. The two systems are matching, right? So if they don't match, we already know like it's going to create a lot of trouble. So yeah, so those are some of the operational level questions, and there may be more. Like I said, these are minimum things we need to capture. Okay. Yeah. So I think we covered that 5 levels of this framework. And like I said, this is not the only framework. There are many frameworks, but this is a very simple framework. It just has some questions and some deliverables, right? And that gives us a lot of information and it clarifies requirements upfront. Okay. Yeah, anybody wants to add anything based on your experience? Like I know you have worked on some of the integration projects. Okay, cool. So let's move on. So far we talked about how to get the requirements, but sometimes we have to avoid certain things, right? So they say like in life we need to do certain things, but sometimes it's better to avoid a lot of things, right? You should not get into unnecessary trouble, right? So say for example, you should not do drugs. So that's a very simple statement, but that avoids so much of pain later on in life, right? So that's what these things are. It will avoid a lot of pain if you follow them. If you just avoid them, don't have to do much. You just avoid them. So one thing is point-to-point integration. So it looks like that spaghetti, right? So you, over time it becomes very hard to identify what is happening. There are too many touch points, too many integration, point-to-point integration. So every system is tightly coupled. So there is ERP, there is a CRM, there is Shopify, there is say monitoring system. Everything is connected very tightly. It becomes very hard to add or remove systems because we have to consider like systems will get added and removed, right? So it's not every business is evolving, and as the business evolves, integration will also evolve. So we should not build some tightly coupled integrations, and if we do this, there is no central orchestration. There is no one place we can go and see like what is happening, what are the integrations that are built. So that's one thing we should avoid. So we should definitely try and define an integration layer, right? So generally integration layer is a middleware system, right? But if customer doesn't have a middleware system, then we should say like, okay, let's make one of this system the integration system, right? So whenever something happens, we'll go and see in Salesforce what happens, how the integrations are happening. Maybe we are consolidating all logs in Salesforce, right? So there is one central place to see what is happening. So every customer will not have a middleware, but we have to definitely identify what is that integration layer and avoid this point-to-point integrations as much as possible. Initially, when the business is small and they just have a couple of systems, maybe this is a good idea, right? This is not supposed to be avoided all the time, but based on the context, based on the number of systems involved, probably we should avoid it, right? Again, not identifying system of records. Like we said, if there is a issue, then big system we need to look into. So definitely data conflicts will become very hard to resolve if you don't identify the system of records. And then audit becomes very hard because we don't know who is changing, what is changing, right? And no data ownership. So every piece of data should have exactly one owner, right? So we should not say, okay, we will take data from CRM also and ERP also. No. For orders, ERP is the source of truth. So that's final, right? So we have to identify exactly one owner for every piece of data. Then design for happy path only, right? So we are always saying like integration will work. No failure scenarios identified. So like we already talked, it's not going to work that way. So systems will break. Systems will, even though everything is working fine for past 1 year, then after 1 year, everything will stop working. So requirements assume everything works. That's not a correct pattern. It's an anti-pattern, right? Something we should avoid. So design for failure, not success. Always design for failure. So we should have a fault act basically. If that goes wrong, then what do we do? Then yeah. So Sai, you were asking like, can we do all real-time integration? So we should avoid. So why should we avoid? Then it can cause real-time dependency everywhere. Every system, whenever something happens in one system, every time it pushes the data. What can happen is it can cause performance issues, right? So every time you are pushing the data, so that needs to be processed every time. We can avoid this if we batch the data and push it once. So let's say you are calling for every order, you are calling every order status update, not even order. Every status update you are calling Salesforce, it will consume APIs and it can also cause, it will use our CPU, right? So basically it will reduce the performance and it can also lead to cascading failures. Cascading failures, once it's failed, then rest of the system will also stop working because everything is dependent real time. So if order status is updated in Salesforce, it has to come immediately to Salesforce in ERP, and probably it has to go to other systems also, right? So if there are multiple points of failure. So it can fail, the integration can fail between CRM and ERP and Shopify. So there are so many points of failure, and if we are relying on real time, then every system will not have, like no system will get the update, right? So we should try and avoid too much of synchronous integrations. So by default, we should ask customer to build it asynchronous, right? Even though they will tell us like we want it immediately, unless it is a critical, very, very critical integration, we have to push it to do asynchronous, right? You should batch it and do it, right? So we should understand the criticality. Like if we ask all of those questions, we know exactly which integration is critical. Like there are, I know like there are 20 touch points, but there are only 2 integrations which are really critical. Why build everything as real time, right? Only those 2 we will build as real. Again, no observability or monitoring. So no centralized monitoring, logs are scattered across all the system. So we should ask probably customer to invest on a system like this. They already don't have it, where they consolidate all the logs. So for example, when we deploy an application in AWS, they will use something called CloudWatch, right? Where they will consolidate all the logs. So like that, we should push them to use one of the systems at least. If they don't want to invest into a new system, and actually like on AWS and all, it's actually very economical, right, to do it. So probably we should use those for logging, and it actually avoids a lot of trouble later on. Even though it's an investment for them, it's worth doing it. So centralized monitoring, So we should have get good reports, good monitoring, good like alerts. Whenever something goes wrong, people are getting alerts. So another thing we should avoid is ignoring future systems. So we are only talking about Salesforce and SAP, right? So we are very happy, like we are building only these two integration, but we are not considering like this is a business will grow and business will want to integrate with other systems also. We should basically capture, we should just not design for today's system. That makes future integrations very difficult, and it will force us to re-architecture, right, later on. So we have to change everything that we have done, or if not everything, some of it, right? But actually we can avoid those things. If we ask them like what other systems are there, what plans do you have for other systems, right? And we can also predict it, like, okay, if this is happening today in these two systems, the other system can also get involved very soon, right? So design for future, right? Yeah, I think those are some of the anti-patterns, and like we have been discussing, most of the integration failures are actually not necessarily the code failures, right? Those are requirement failures. We didn't get enough details upfront, so that's why we built it that way. I'm not saying like we never make code mistakes, right? Code mistakes will happen. There are going to be bugs, but if we don't get enough clarity in the information, requirement itself, then obviously the integration will be wrong, no matter how much good code you write, right? Yeah. So anyone wants to add anything? Yeah. Yeah, I think we just need another 5 minutes. So let's move on. Yeah, some of the limitations of Salesforce, right? Even though whatever we talked so far is for generally for integration, any system to any system, but because we are in Salesforce ecosystem, we need to know what are some of the limitations of Salesforce itself, right? And customers might ask those questions, or we should know at least. If customer doesn't ask also, we should know. So API limits. So Salesforce has daily API limits, and they also have per transaction limits. So per transaction limit could be like 6 MB of each size. So that's a transaction limit. In one transaction, you can only use 6 MB of each size, right? Now they are pushing a file which is say 20 MB. Obviously, it will not go through, right? Then we have to find another way to do it. Similarly, the CPU time is 10 seconds. So the integration, when we are doing, if it doesn't go through in 10 seconds, then it will fail. It will throw the timeout error, correct? So we should know those limits, and we should know daily limits. So daily limits could change based on the org that you are on, like in the edition that you are on, enterprise edition, unlimited edition. They have different limits, but we should know those. At least Google at that time and tell them these are the limits, right? Depending on what edition the customer is on. Then data volume, right? This is one of the most important things when it comes to Salesforce. High volume of historical data, it will basically degrade the performance that is there, but it will also consume our storage, right? And Salesforce storage is not cheap, it's very expensive. So we should basically identify if this data actually belongs to Salesforce, right? So do we need to keep everything in Salesforce? Customer will say push everything. They want every data in one system, but we should tell them like, does it really belong here, right? So for example, we were discussing in the morning, right, Priyanka, you were saying for some system every, yeah, yeah. So if so much of data is accumulated, it will basically consume so much of space. It will degrade performance, and it will also make sure like you will have to buy more storage. And even if you buy that storage, probably you will consume that also, right? So then we have to, if the data has to be there in system, then we have to build some archival mechanism, right? Like we don't need all data all the time. So we need data for certain decision making, and we can tell them like, okay, we'll get it, we'll make sure the data is there, but not necessarily in Salesforce, right? We'll keep it outside, and we'll make sure that it will come into Salesforce when needed. So again, another point we have to make is, so we have to make sure like everything is not immediate consistency. So whenever something happened in one system, it will not reflect immediately in the other system. So that is that immediate consistency. Every system is like, okay, up to date all the time. But that is not the reality. We have to tell them, we have to set expectation for eventual consistency. Okay, wait, the data is not consistent, it will eventually happen. So you wait for 15 minutes and data will be in sync, right? So we are optimizing for eventual consistency, not for immediate consistency. And this is what we should aim for every integration, right? So people might feel like everything is needed, right? We need immediately, but in life, many things can be done, like can have a little bit of delays. We can live with those things, right? So we should basically push them to do, go for eventual consistency over immediate consistency, right? And we should know like why we are doing it, because there are limitations. Say platform events, they will fire immediately, but the other system is not listening it, then it will not get that platform event, right? It will be lost. Then we have to re-trigger or probably process those again. Similarly, let's say there are some asynchronous processes that are happening, like platform event itself is a asynchronous process, right? So we don't know, it may come immediately or it may come later. So we should tell them, okay, we will eventually make sure that the two systems are in sync, but don't expect it to be in sync all the time, right? So what happened? Sorry. Yeah. So we have to also make sure in Salesforce, whenever we change some schema and configuration, that can actually impact the integration. Let's say we just renamed the field and we didn't know like it is used by some integration. We renamed, like White asked us to rename the field. So what do I do? So then we may change the pick list values, right? Just changing the small pick list value will break the integration, right? Then maybe we added a validation rule and so on. Then Salesforce is not actually built for integration, right? Salesforce is not an integration system. It's a system of like system for business processes, mostly targeted towards sales and support users, right? And if we start like if we want that native capability to monitor everything, that is not there. That is not there in Salesforce. Either we have to build it or build it outside. We have to either build it on Salesforce or build it outside Salesforce. But Salesforce itself doesn't have it. So that's where they will say like go for MuleSoft, right? Yeah. So we have to also know like if customer has bought one Salesforce on, they assume like we have got everything. So now everything, every problem will be solved for us. That is not the case. The customer will probably, when we sell it to them, when people go as a sales team, they might have said like, okay, every problem will be solved. No, don't worry. You just buy Salesforce. Salesforce has everything you need. But the reality is it depends on what edition of Salesforce they are using. And say for example, some edition might not have platform events. Then what do? Like we are building on integrations using platform events, that's our plan, but the edition itself doesn't support it, right? Also, there are certain objects don't support certain things. So for example, change data capture is not supported by every object. And I'll tell like one integration I was doing, in that we said initially like you will build everything using change data capture. So then I was building this. We just had to pass two details, case details and case comments. So case object supports change data capture, but case comment object doesn't support change data capture. Now I told them like, okay, it doesn't work like that. So Salesforce has limitations and we have to build probably write code or some flows to do something else. Like they were like, you said initially like everything works, right? Everything works with change data capture. Now, so we should know like what is available, what is not available, which always should validate against what edition we are using and what licenses they have got. So yeah, I think those are some of the limitations. So any other limitations that you have come across? Okay.
I also placed that they had the professional license, but they wanted
Yeah, it doesn't even have APIs, I guess. Yeah. So professional license, you cannot do much. There is no integration. Yeah. So some of the key takeaways from this session is like we said initially, integration is not about integrating two systems. Just because we have ERT and Salesforce, it doesn't make sense to connect them, right? Unless it is solving some business process. So integration is actually a business process. It's not a technical thing. How we do is using integration, but it's actually solving a business problem. Then, so again, reiterating, we should assume that it will fail. The systems will fail. So clarity upfront saves lot of cost and effort and a lot of fights later on. So get clarity upfront and then ask a lot of questions. So yeah, so with that, any questions? Yeah.
It is getting updated. Data is quick, come on, system product. But this is for us, right?
Yes. Like near real time. Yeah. Yeah. So specifically how platform events work is whenever something happens, some change happened in let's say case, it will trigger the platform event. We can trigger it immediately. But the other system should be listening to that platform event. So let's say Salesforce case update happened and ERP is not listening to it, then it will not get the update. So what happens now is there is something called replay ID. Every event that is triggered has one ID. So ERP should save that till what ID I have received. So this is the last event I have received, and after that I have not received any update. So they will replay from that point. So they will say let's start from this point. So I have lost 10 updates. So if I replay it, it will get those 10 updates. So that's where it is asynchronous. Immediately the event is triggered, but it depends on the other system whether it is listening or not. If the other system is not ready, then it will not get the update. Then we have to use that replay ID to process it from that point, right? So there are like when you specifically with platform events, there are three ways you can do it. One is you can configure it like forget about whatever is lost, get me the latest events, or you can say get me from last 2 days, or probably you can say with this replay ID, start from this replay ID, right? So something like that you can configure. Yeah, Salesforce keeps these events for I think 3 days. So within those 3 days you can process them again. So those will not be lost. Okay. Any other questions?
Integration was not integration fee
Yeah.
already bought.
It should. It should. If we are not doing that, then it will be. Yeah, we can keep it outside or we have to build it within Salesforce, but generally not recommended within Salesforce because there will be so many logs and it will again consume data within Salesforce. But we have to build it somewhere. If we don't build it, then we won't know what is happening.
This body.
Monitoring, correct. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you so much, everybody. Hope it will help you all. Okay, and if you have any questions, ask me later also. Not necessarily no. Okay. Yes, yes. There are a lot of design patterns which Salesforce actually has published design patterns. Actually, I took one session also. If you want, I can give you the recording for that session. Right. Or maybe we'll do another session on integration design patterns. Okay. Cool. Thank you so much and Happy New Year, everybody. Have a good year.